Chapter 41. Brisk morning air said hello to the little clams covered in sand by the sea in the ex-Scandinavian state. A 10-year-old Viking descendant boy was walking through the salty dunes. To him, the air still seemed too humid, the sand under his feet too damp and rough. He walked through mountains of rusting debris of all sorts. A junkyard had assimilated from what the sea had brought ashore this spring. His father was the owner and main engineer of a lab, a tinker factory right on the beach next to the junkyard, and his uncle was often to be found at sea looking for more junk. The cold northern stream provided plenty of trash to be recycled. The last World War had been real juicy around this area. The boy's uncle had a Geiger counter on the ship crackling away and going off like crazy in some places. There was still plenty of radiation around. However, he didn't mind risking his life. He would just put his antimatter ionizing suit on and dive down for extra goodies. For him, it was worth the risk. The uncle had a peculiar gift of seeing in the dark. He loved the surprise of the sea and the treasures buried on the bottom. He once found an old silicone sex doll with big boobs dressed as a policeman strapped to a wheelchair. The boy made his way through the metal hills of junk, just to look at the horizon. The sea was singing her everlasting song. The boy took a chest full of cold air, and when he exhaled, he had become a man. The weather was chilling, but the boy was not bothered by it. For him, the weather was just fine. The junkyard was just fine. The toxicity and radiation of the sea was just fine. The pills he had to take were just fine. The world overall was just fine. Everything was perceived as normal. The brain and epigenome of the child didn't care for any of that trouble. His body would grow naturally, abiding the rules of biology. The boy jumped down from a small cliff and his feet sank into the tough sand. He walked up to the water and saw brown pieces of algae, hundreds of broken seashells, and tiny white bubbles summoned by the beating water. He crouched down and put his palm in the water and played with it. He felt happiness. The beach and water lacked a primal look, perhaps a little too neat and clean. The uncle was often combing the shore so he could instantly notice when something was washed up. The boy stood there and observed the scene. Not a single thing had washed up. Maybe his uncle had already been there before him and collected everything. The boy walked back to the junkyard. He dug around through the stuff there and grabbed a few bits of this and that. He then proceeded to walk into his father's tinkering factory and sat down by one of the empty tables. He welded and hammered, and after an hour, he had made a gun out of the junk he had just collected from the mountains of debris. He held the warm gun in his hands.
Yeah, just give it 2 or 3 days. The brain cells will heal and adjust to the microneuroconnectors. Come in then for a recalibration.
The father saw his child standing there holding a gun, waiting for him to spare a minute. He was just finishing work on a client with a new brain augmentation device.
Okay, how much do I owe you?
The client was getting out of the weird-looking chair.
1,900 kroner, and another 260 kroner tomorrow for the calibration. Just pay everything tomorrow.
The father knew that the guy wouldn't run anywhere with that thing uncalibrated.
Okay, sir. See you in a few days then.
The client put a hat on and left.
And now to you, mister. What did you make there? What is it you were holding in your hands?
He looked at his son curiously, but he already knew the answer.
Can I have a bullet, Dad? Just one.
The boy's eyes were full with hope.
Okay, just don't hurt anything, especially yourself, okay?
The father looked at his son. The crest of intelligence was turning boredom into weapons. The father believed that it was the mere unfolding of epigenetics before him.
Of course, Father.
The boy felt excitement. His senses started to tingle. Life seemed more beautiful suddenly. The sharpness of his vision became keen and relentless. The father handed his son a single bullet and watched him walk outside. He himself turned his attention toward a gardening bot. One of the nearby farms had brought it in. It had broken down. He started fixing it and was hoping to arrange for the uncle to bring it back to the farm later that day. The farmers would have to reprogram it for the required field work. The boy happily ran outside. He looked at the bullet, and it was the most dazzling thing. Flowers nor butterflies didn't stand a chance next to the charm of a bullet. The boy quickly built a robot-like fella from the junk. Just a moment later, he was like a sniper on the ground, observing the robot fiend in front of him. The boy looked at the pale moon above, felt the peace within and loaded the bullet into his gun. He aimed and felt the recoil of the gun. He saw sparks fly from the chest of the enemy and heard the bullet ricochet. He heard it whistle past his right ear. He felt his heart beat. The boy did not know that he was mirroring his inner self, the code within his cells mirroring reality. The robot was dead. It was killed by a primitive weapon built out of junk. The boy knew that warfare had become a lot more complex than the gun he was holding in his hands. He returned inside to watch his father repair the farming bot.